York City Police Department. You have been ordered per New York.
This morning, New York police cleared out another protest encampment at NYU, taking 50 into custody. It is the latest in a busy week for pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses, resulting in numerous arrests. How is the Jewish community impacted by the anti-Gaza war movement? Youngstown Area Jewish Federation Executive Director Bonnie Deutsch-Birdman is here now to explain. Thank you for joining me, Bonnie.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, how are the protests? They're spanning nationally across Ohio. We saw them at Case Western, OSU, and a planned one for this weekend at Kent State. Heightening your security, and is it causing concern for the Jewish community?
Well, you know, of course, we've been talking about issues of anti-Semitism on campuses for a long time, and it certainly reached its height in recent weeks, and particularly since the Hamas massacres on October 7th. So we're watching them very closely, and we agree with everybody that freedom of speech is sacrosanct. We certainly don't disagree with that in any way. It's when speech transforms into hate, into attacks and intimidations, and an overall climate for Jewish students who are just not feeling safe on campuses, both in how they're feeling and how they're being treated.
Now, the protesters, they're calling for ceasefire, their tuition money not to go to Israel. At this point in the war, 224 aid workers have been killed, 484 health workers, 95 journalists, along with a number of other civilians that we don't even have exact numbers on. Is this not the time for a ceasefire, and at what point should all of this end? What's your thought on that?
Well, you know, the calls for a ceasefire I find are interesting because if you heard Secretary of State Anthony Blinken this week, he made it clear that Israel has made yet another generous offer of a ceasefire, and Hamas continues to reject it. All Hamas has to do is release the hostages and lay down its arms, and they have chosen not to do that. So we'll have to wait and see how things progress with what's going on the ground.
And they have been held captive since October. Are any local members of the Federation over in Israel, to your knowledge, helping on the ground?
We don't have anyone at this point, but we are planning a trip in mid-June. It is a trip that is open to anyone who wishes to come with us, and we'll be touring the sites of the Hamas massacres in the south and spending some time in both Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And we're looking forward to really getting a sense of what's happening on the ground and what additional things we can be doing to help.
Yeah, it's a lot of complexities to what's happening. Do you agree Hamas and Israel need to do a better job, both sides, of avoiding the civilian casualties, or is it just not that easy?
Oh, I of course agree that civilian casualties are a challenge, and Israel has been doing that since the beginning of the war. It's Hamas that hides behind civilians. It sets up its military sites in hospitals and in schools. And, you know, if people really understood the issues, they'd be out protesting Hamas's treatment of its own civilians.
The Biden administration is pledging more funding to support Israel in its fight. It's part of the $95 billion war aid package passed last week. $26 billion of it is for aid that goes to Israel. Do you, though, have hopes for a peace agreement in the future? How far off do you think that could be?
You know, I can't prognosticate when things are going to happen, but of course we hope for peace. We have stood for peace consistently. We have openly supported a two-state solution to the ongoing crisis. We recognize that both Israelis and Palestinians are there, and they're there to stay. And right now, the biggest obstacle to peace is Hamas, that openly calls for the destruction of Israel and for the obliteration of Jews worldwide.
All right, Bonnie, thank you so much for joining me right here on 21 News at 5 as we continue to monitor the protests that seem to be still going on as we enter the weekend. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.